Here we are with the newest planeswalker to hit the game, Commodore Guff. Tricolor. Always great to see a new tricolor walker in the game. Red, white, and blue. We haven't had a tricolor planeswalker that has blue in a while, so that's already a good start, right? One of the great things about him, if you want to pick him up, is if you are either new to the game or just didn't go for it yet. He comes with the Teferi Hero of Dominaria Vanguard, and it's widely considered the best Vanguard in the game. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at it. He's an 18 mana Vanguard, 4 shields. This is why. If this support has the Heroism emblem, when you draw a card, exile an opposing card at random. This means that every time you draw a card after getting the Heroism emblem on this Vanguard, you're going to be basically wiping out anything on your opponent's side, aside from other Vanguards, but everything else, it's fair game. And it usually goes from creatures first, keeps going from support to support from there. The +2, draw a card, it gains a mana equal to the number of white and blue gems on the board, up to 10, and the -8 is this card gains the Heroism emblem and draw 3 cards. When you get up to 8 shields, well, you're actually going to want to go more than 8 shields, because if you hit that with 8 shields only, it basically exiles itself, and so you don't want to do that. If you have the Heroism emblem and you draw 3 cards, it's going to be wiping off all of your opponent's creatures right there. And anytime you draw cards after that, you're just going to be picking off anything on your opponent's side one by one. And if they don't have Vanguard removal, good luck to them, because they're not going to be able to recover really. Unless they get lucky or you get unlucky and this thing runs out of shields from gem swaps or whatnot. So really need to tell you about that in case you're not familiar with this Vanguard and why it's so good. But back to our regularly scheduled program of reviewing Commodore Guff. Okay, so let's look at his abilities. His abilities tend to revolve mostly around Vanguards, making good use of them, which is great because in the current standard we have a lot of interesting Vanguards, and it seems to be a philosophy of WebCore to design Vanguards for each set with varying amounts of utility, but I just appreciate that we have a lot that we are getting in the game with regularity now. So even after rotation, I believe we'll continue to get some good Vanguards in the game. His kit is going to be very viable in the future, even after rotation of the current Vanguards in standard. So that's just my opinion on it. But anyhow, let's take a look at what these abilities actually do. We got Meddling with Fate, 10 loyalty cost. Pick 2 of the first 4 cards from your library, fetch those cards, then reduce the cost of each Vanguard card in your hand by 6. So most of the time you're probably going to want to be grabbing Vanguards to take advantage of that cost reduction, but you don't necessarily have to. Fetching 2 of the next 4 cards in your library can be very useful, even if they happen to not be Vanguards. But for 10 loyalty, it's a little steep. I think that if I would have liked this ability a little bit more if it cost, 6 mana. Still a pretty solid ability. Not a lot to complain about there. I like it. Library Staff for only 2 more loyalty, 12 loyalty. Create 8 red wizard tokens. So this is where it starts to get fun. So the red wizards, they are detective wizards, 1/2 tokens. Activate 2 red. Convert X gems to red. X is this creature's power. So right off the bat, when you hit one of the activate 2 gems, you're going to be converting 8 gems to red. And from what I've found, it's really not too difficult to hit these activated gems. You really, most of the time, need to just hit one of them, and then you will likely cascade into hitting the other one. So that's going to give you some extra gem conversion there. It's pretty easy to buff this red wizard token, I would say. There are a lot of cards that will do that for you. I will show you one of my favorites in the deck build, but from what I found, if you have some amount of red conversion in your deck, you're not going to have too hard of a time hitting those activate gems. So an 816 body is not too bad either. Pretty solid ability. I really like it. Before I started using him, I thought it would be a little bit more difficult to make these red wizards useful, but they really are pretty dang good. And then here's my favorite ability with him, Titan's Might. 15 loyalty, very reasonable cost. Your non-simple supports gain 4 shield. This effect can affect vanguard supports. Deal X damage to each opposing creature. X is the sum of shields of all supports you control. And before it was fixed, it wasn't counting vanguards, but now it actually is. So that makes this even more lethal. You may activate vanguard abilities again this turn. Great. So that is very similar to Kazmina being able to reactivate vanguards when you use her second ability. One of the cool things you'll see in the deck spotlights is how you can really take advantage of vanguards because of this ability supercharging them. You'll be getting all your loyalty right back pretty easily. And yeah, I can't wait to show you in a bit here. But before we do that, let's look at his mana bonuses. This is a really good spread for tricolor walkers. I feel like Webcore is probably going to be very careful not to give us any more advantage than what they gave us for this Planeswalker when it comes to mana bonuses. Because I feel like getting +4 on 2 of his colors is really good. I like that they gave us the +4 on red as well. So we get to take advantage of all the red gems, and so we're not stunting the mana gain from that on purpose. So that's always great. The mana bonuses being -2 on black and green haven't been too big of an issue for me because I've been able to make it up from the mana bonuses on blue and red. So as far as tricolor walkers go, this is my favorite type of mana spread. In Octagon, why could you not have given us this for Dihada? But anyhow, this ain't about trashing Octagon. It is about celebrating Commodore Guff and the good job that Webcore did with it. All right, now let's look at the decks that I built for him. Okay, so when I first started building for him, I thought that it would be fun to make themes around each of his colors. So it started as it was going to be a red dominant deck, a white dominant, and a blue. And it just sort of evolved into what these decks became after getting used to how he works and just cards that synergize well for him. So here are my favorite decks that I built for him so far. Okay, so this first one is my control deck. So we got Connecting the Dots, Aurelia's Vindicator, and Savior of Olenbach. These are the triforce of getting cards played for free. Because Connecting the Dots, if you can get this out quickly, you're just going to be able to play cards for free just from exiling them from your hand. Because at the beginning of your turn, return the first creature card from your exile into play under your control. If you can't, return the first support card from your exile to play under your control. So basically any permanent with creatures being prioritized is going to come into play without having to spend any mana to do so. Just got to get that Connecting the Dots on the board quickly. And you would be surprised at how few people play any worthwhile support destruction. You would think that more people would want to deal with all the nasty supports we have in the game. From what I've seen in previews for the next set, support destruction is going to be a must. So that's just a little preview on what's happening soon. But I can't talk much about that. Let's get back on track here. Aurelia's Vindicator. There's an alt art version of this in Fibblethip when I recorded this. So keep a lookout for this card. And if you watched my previous video on Connecting the Dots, you will understand why I like this card. But even if you don't, I'll just give you the quick rundown. When this creature attacks, return the first X cards from your exile to your hand. X is this card's level, then the last 2 cards in your hand gain full mana. So what you want to do when you play this card, before you get a chance to attack with it, you want to throw 2 of your non-spell cards into your exile so that when she attacks, they come right back to your hand with full mana. And even if you only just throw 1 permanent away, she'll still trigger. So even if you have a spell as the last card in your hand, if she attacks and brings back, a creature or support to your hand, that spell will still get mana because it doesn't matter that it's the card that you exiled. It just has to be the last or second to last card in your hand to get the full mana. So that's a little trick to make her even more useful. Don't even worry about the disguise. It doesn't matter that much. I'm glad that they didn't put her great ability behind the little paywall of the reveal. You can read that on your own if you care, but you probably won't after you do. And then Savior of Olenbach. So enjoy this card while it's still in standard. And for me, I've been starting to use it a lot more again. When this creature dies or is exiled from the battlefield, pick up to 4 of the first 4 non-spell cards from your exile. Move those cards into play under their owner's control. Not only is he nice removal when you get one of your other creatures on the board because of the train. When this creature trains, exile target opposing creature into your exile. If you can't, exile the first creature card without buried from your graveyard. Oh, there's a nice little synergy. So if you exile a creature of your opponent's with Savior of Olenbach, connecting the dots will put it onto your side on your next turn. So that's pretty neat. But anyway, if this creature gets exiled or destroyed, you get to bring back those 4 non-spell cards from your exile. So it's a good way to get more stuff on the board. So I like to play either Savior or Connecting the Dots first, and then just let those 2 cards get most of my other things into play. Aurelia's Vindicator will help me just keep things locked down. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, we already talked about why this is good, but we're going to be exiling our opponent. Cut your losses to get mana going. Tamiel Field Researcher, great card to have with Guff because his third ability is not only pumping this support's shields up, but it's going to be letting you trigger it again. So you're going to be up to 7 or more shields in no time. And so it's just going to be giving you tons of mana every turn. And even if it gets wiped out, like a lot of people I know are scared to play vanguards because they feel like, oh, what's the point of investing all this mana into a card that can easily get wiped away? Well, for one, that doesn't stop you from playing creatures now, does it? Same thing can happen to them. And second of all, Guff's abilities make it so that losing a Vanguard is really not that big a deal because you can replace it very easily and get it back to the amount of shields you want very quickly. And then these 2 cards, Ambiguity and Suppression Bonds, his third ability is going to give this card an extra 4 shields, so it's going to make it even more difficult to get rid of, which is Ambiguity's main weakness is that it only has 2 shields, so it can sometimes be taken out very quickly and easily, but with 6 shields, that's going to be way more of a tall task. So it's probably not going to be taken out easily with just gem swaps alone. And if you're not familiar with ambiguity and how it works, basically the more time bubbles you create, the harder it is for your opponent to recover. They're just going to be discarding their hand. They're going to be whittling their creatures away. And it just becomes a really oppressive card that is really hard to recover from if you get enough time bubbles on the board. And then suppression bonds. Well, you should know what suppression bonds does, but its main weakness is that it only has 1 shield. But if you put an extra 4 shields on it, then it's going to be a lot more useful. So the first creature opponent controls is disabled, right? So a lot of the ways that people get around that is just matching into it so that it gets destroyed and loses its effectiveness. But with its third ability, you're not going to have to worry about that too much. It's just you got to keep it around for long enough so that you can actually put the shields on it. But, a lot of people still play Suppression Bonds, still a great card, and fantastic for controlling your opponent. And then last card in here, Kylox is Volt Strider. So a couple of reasons why this is in here. We don't have a ton of spells in this deck, but we do have Golden Wish, which is going to be bringing our vanguards into play, along with Volt Strider, actually. If this is triggering every turn, you're going to be getting free spells, and they can help us win the game quicker by pumping our creatures up. And if you have a red wizard on the board, it's an extra buff for that as well. So if you have the red wizard on the board, this is going to be pumping up that creature too. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do anything for us at the beginning of our turn when you want the red wizards to be buffed enough to give us more red conversion, but still, it's a really good card for helping speed up matches. So that's one of the things about control decks. They're not usually known for being very fast, but this one holds its own and kind of hard to lose with it. So hope you like it. Okay, this next deck is all about taking advantage of vanguards. And so we're going to be really relying on his third ability for a lot of things here. So we have a lot more vanguards in this deck than we had in our previous deck that we just looked at. And a lot of this is going to hinge on getting the gauntlet out as quickly as we can. When you activate a loyalty ability or vanguard ability, proliferate, escalate, then if you have 10 or less loyalty, gain an extra swap. So that's going to be really useful for us. When you cast a support or spell card, proliferate, escalate. We don't really worry about that in this deck because we're not really making any toxic tokens. We're just really using it for the extra swaps we get from triggering all of these vanguards and getting a lot of loyalty from it. So we got Golden Wish. Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh, is going to be helping us to keep the opponent's side free and clear of creatures. Dakon Shadow Slayer does a lot of things for us. Surveil 2, we're going to be able to shape what comes next out of our library, and then we can take advantage of that with Aminatu, which draws a card, then creates a copy in your hand of the top card of your library. So if you Surveil 2, you'll know exactly what Aminatu is going to pull for you, and then after you trigger it. Then, of course, Tamiyo Field Researcher, giving us all the free mana we want. And let's go back to our Dakon. And then exile target creature. That gives us an extra little bit of removal. But also pick one of the first 4 non-spell artifact cards from your graveyard. Move that card to play under your control. So we got our 3 cards here at the bottom that we'll probably get a choice of bringing back. So we got the Gauntlet, Crypt, Mox Sapphire. A lot of blue cards, so Mox Sapphire is good for bringing those into play. A really fascinating little bug I found while using this with Moonshaker Cavalry. So what happens here? Exile target creature you control, then create a copy of that creature into the battlefield under your control and reinforce that creature. So what happens is that reinforcement actually triggers an extra enter the battlefield effect. Moonshaker Cavalry, reinforce each creature you control 1 time. Your creatures get +X and gain flying. X is the number of creatures you control, including their reinforcement. So this card is great for not only pumping up our other creature that I'll get to, but our red wizard token. So what you want to do is get Moonshaker Cavalry on the board along with the red wizard and Kranko here. Then once that happens, you hit her -2 and you're going to be re-triggering Moonshaker. It's going to be pumping up your creatures. And then when that reinforcement happens here, it's going to be triggering Moonshaker's ETB again. So enjoy it while it lasts, folks. And then the last card in our deck here, Kranko, Baron of Tin Street. This card is very underrated. I think more people should be playing this card. It only costs 5 mana. It's got haste. It's a 3/3 goblin. But At the beginning of combat on your turn, a simple token you control at random loses 1 shield. So if you're playing with gold tokens, that's kind of nice. Then create 2 goblin tokens. In this deck, we're not going to be getting any goblins, but that's fine. When this creature attacks, reinforce each goblin creature you control. So that's going to be reinforcing them. So right away, it's going to be a 6/6 goblin right when you cast it, because it's going to be reinforcing itself. Then destroy an opposing land support. If you do, your opponent gains 2 mana. So that's great. I know not a lot of people are playing with lands right now, but it helps against somebody like Renin Realmbreaker, whose third ability is very nasty, but it's a land, so you can get it off the board pretty quickly with Krenko. There aren't a lot of cards in this game, at least in standard right now, that specifically target lands. So being able to do that with a creature like this is pretty nice. So it's such a cheap creature, and it builds up very quickly. Within a few turns, you're already pretty strong creature, and those reinforcements stack up a lot, especially if you're creating more and more reinforcements with Moonshaker Cavalry. So this deck can win so fast, and it really takes advantage of his third ability in a way that's pretty impressive. It's probably the deck that I would rely on the most to get me a quick win out of these decks that I've showed you so far. But let me show you now the deck that I think is the most fun to run for me personally. All right, so I call this deck Fireworks because its main win con is around Koth Fire of Resistance. So this Vanguard is all about getting it pumped up enough shields as quickly as you can so that it starts doing tons of damage. And especially when paired with the Red Wizard, it's going to be doing so much for us. When a red gem is destroyed, deal 3 damage to your opponent's Planeswalker. And it counts every red gem. So if you do a match 3 of red, that's 9 damage to your opponent. If you're converting the whole board with red gems, it's going to be doing that much damage. So if you're cascading a bunch of red with all the conversion, it's going to be doing so much damage. It can usually win very fast. There's a couple things happening in this deck. We got Captain Ripley Vance. When you cast a creature, this creature gets +3/+3. When you cast a spell, deal 6 damage to your opponent's Planeswalker. And when you cast a support, first card in your hand gains 9 mana. So this is actually probably the most expendable card in this deck. There's a lot of supports in this deck to cast, so it does definitely give you some good amounts of mana through doing that. It's not slinging a bunch of spells all the time, so it's only going to be doing some amount of damage per turn, but it does stack up. Kylox's Volt Strider, we talked about that before, but it's going to be giving us Golden Wish, Self-Reflection, or River Tears Charm. So my favorite thing to do is put Self-Reflection on Atraxa, or if I want to copy one of my opponent's creatures onto my side, it's also very good for that. And then River Tears Charm is just some nice removal, and depending on how many red gems are on the board, sometimes you can cast some of your other cards, but it's kind of, a lot of the cards in this deck are fairly expensive, so it's not likely that you'll just have 12 or more red gems just hanging out on the board without you matching them. But it can happen. So Stormcarved Coast is a land that I'm just using mainly to give the rest of the cards in my hand mana, so it can help with that part of things. Leyline of the Guild Pact is really good for destroying a bunch of gems on your opponent's side, so that will hopefully, as long as they're not playing a red Planeswalker, will set up more red matches for you. And then Sunken Citadel. If you want to use this card to convert 7 gems to the most present color on the board, that's great, especially if you have a lot of red gems on the board already when you're playing this card. And then we're going to be giving Guff more mana bonuses with it as well. But I mostly have it in here for the ETB. that 7-gem conversion, and hopefully it's going to be red gems that you're converting. Golden Wish, of course, is always great. You're going to not only want to bring in Koth and Volt Strider onto the battlefield, but it's going to be helping us get to his third ability. So most of the time, you're going to be filling up your loyalty bar to the max with one casting a Golden Wish. So that means just from one Golden Wish, you are going to be able to use his ability twice in a row. So that's awesome. And that's really going to be pumping up the Koth fire resistance. As you can see, it's just wreaking havoc on the board and your opponent when you're using this. In these battles I'm showcasing, we got one where, it's holding its own against a pretty nasty deck that is throwing everything it can at me. And even with my creatures not able to withstand the onslaught, the Koth Vanguard is doing all the work that it needs to do to win the match. And then the next battle is just lava and fireballs raining down on your opponent's head. Shout out to Paladin Robin because that Koth fire resistance got off to a quick start and it just is unrelenting in this battle. So hope you guys enjoyed these battles here and these decks. I had a lot of fun making them, and I'm just having a lot of fun with Commodore Guff all around. So let's go over to our final grades now. All right, time to give out final grades for Commodore Guff. Let's start with max hit points. Not bad. Always can be better. More hit points, the better in almost all cases. But it's up to Webcore to decide just how many hit points each Planeswalker gets. I honestly have no idea how they decide that. But I'm just going to give them a B+. Could be better, but definitely not anywhere near the bottom. Next, we got mana spread. Like I was saying before, I don't know if you can make a better mana spread for a tricolor walk without it getting severely imbalanced toward too overpowered. So since there's room for improvement, but it's still the best mana spread in current tricolor walkers, I give it an A+. I'm glad that they gave red the +4 boost on it too instead of white. His first ability is pretty decent. Obviously, being able to fetch 2 of the next 4 cards in your deck is always nice. It's a little bit expensive. It's also nice, that little reduction in cost of Vanguard. So you're encouraged to grab the next 2 Vanguards in your library. Even if you're not playing with a lot of Vanguards, he will still benefit from being able to fetch 2 of the next 4 cards. It's too bad that they don't gain any mana, but if they did so, maybe it'd be a little bit overpowered. But I don't know, maybe not. I mean, Kasmina's first gives the ability to give your card you fetch as much mana as you can put on a shield of a support. So there's that. It's a B- for me. Second ability, really good. Obviously depends on how long you can keep those red wizards on the board. You can continue to pump it up by using its second ability multiple times. It's not terribly expensive, especially when compared to the expensiveness of his first ability. And you can get a surprising amount of utility out of these red wizards if you build around them and have cards that benefit from red gem matches like the Koth Vanguard. And Koth is a Vanguard, so it benefits from the rest of his abilities. So anyhow, this second ability gets an A- for me. Third ability, super good. Definitely the bedrock of this Planeswalker. I love that it's very reasonably costed at only 15 loyalty. You get a little bit of Kasmina's second in here where you can reactivate Vanguard abilities. So that really helps with a lot of the decks that I was building, where You either get the shields up on Tamio and Teferi for the great things that those do, but also for Koth Vanguard to use it as more of a win con. I haven't really used the Jace Vanguard with Commodore Guff all that much, but definitely a solid win con there as well. I believe Paladin Robin showcased that in his review of Commodore Guff, so definitely check that out. This ability, the cheapness of it, this ability, the low cost of it, the amount of utility you get out of it. Oh, and I forgot to mention that it can most of the time end up being a board wipe, so you get a little bit of like Dakon's third in his utility. So for me, this is an S tier ability. So versatility. This basically means for me, can this planeswalker use a variety of different cards, or are the abilities restrictive or restricted by them? And I would say he can use definitely a high variety of cards. His kit is mostly built toward using vanguards, so you certainly don't have to use vanguards. I feel like you lose a lot of utility if you don't. So in that way, his versatility is a little bit limited in the fact that you should use vanguards with him. But fortunately, we have a lot of strong vanguards in standard right now, and I believe this will continue to be the case. I hope they don't prove me wrong on that, but I'm going to give him an A- in versatility. And now card utility. So basically, this means to me, does this Planeswalker's abilities help make the cards in the deck better, or does it need the right cards to make the abilities shine? Well, it's a little bit of both, right? His abilities make vanguards way better, but he also needs vanguards to make his abilities shine. So he is very good at making vanguards really good. And if you're not somebody who's used vanguards that often, I highly encourage you to start building with them and really get used to them, because especially if you plan on picking up Commodore Guff, and if you watched my review here pretty closely, you could see the absolute dominance that you can assert by using vanguards here. So I give him an A in card utility. And then fun. A lot of times this ends up being one of the more important parts of it, because we are playing a game, and a game should be fun, and the cards and planeswalkers that you use should have some amount of fun with them if you plan on using them a lot. So I think he is an S tier when it comes to fun, just because I had a blast making my vanguards really shine, and those red wizards, pumping them up and doing really fun things with them. I really didn't have a lot of frustrations with trying to pop those activated gems that the second ability red wizards make. Yeah, I found him easy to use. I have all the cards more or less. So, I have the ability to make anything I want. And most of the things that I tried worked well when building around his abilities and keeping all those in mind. So, yeah, I found him a lot of fun. So now my final grade is an A. So this is, I believe, the highest grade I've given to a new walker in a while. I do think that he's better than Lord Windgrace. You lose green, so that's a step down in the current meta, but you make up for it by having so many good vanguards in blue and all the blue shenanigans that you can do by having blue in his color pie. So really fun planeswalker. I will highly recommend him both to vets and new players. I still have yet to try him by simulating limited card options. So I do definitely want to do a follow-up for him and do sort of a guide to Commodore Guff for newer players, and see if I can build some really fun things around him with minimal mythics and rares and all that. Maybe no masterpieces either. So definitely keep a lookout for a part 2 later on in the future. In the meantime, I have a lot of other fun ideas coming in the pipeline, a lot of non-review related stuff, but just more diving into some of the things about this game that we all like, or things that I feel like need to be better explained in the game. And also, I do want to go back to some of the older planeswalkers and do a grading system. So keep a lookout for that Make sure you're subscribed if you're not yet already so that you don't miss those. And yeah, having a lot of fun on this channel. Thank you again to Webcore for letting me use this Planeswalker and taking all of our feedback into account when designing these cards and all that. So just keep doing a good job and continuing to improve on the game that we all love. All that being said, thank you again to everybody who watches my channel. As Gauzzmaster always says, you can be anywhere on the internet but here, so I appreciate you being here. All right, I'm going to stop stealing everything Gauze does and try and make my own original content soon. And yeah, I'll see you all soon. Bye.